has already been a full-length video. You can see this. There was one 2 years ago. There was one this year from the Midwest LSA Expo that has the new stuff. One way you can tell it right away, as my friend John Calla found out, is if it talks about light personal aircraft being gone, that's the new one because it's gone. So let's go ahead and get into it here. Mosaic, you already saw what it stood for there, but you have to understand that this thing has been a long effort in progress, and it's still in progress, and there will be changes. So it's possible that every single thing you'll hear today will be wrong. Now, so why should you listen then? Well, because I think mostly it will be right, but it could get changed. We don't know about that stuff. That's just the nature of the beast at this point in time. FAA doesn't know either. They don't have all the answers either. But this has to get done by December 31st, 2023. Has to get done. Why is that so essential? Because Congress gave FAA money, upped their budget. They always give them money, but they upped their budget per FAA's request so that they could integrate drones, UAVs, RPVs, whatever you want to call those things with multi-copters on them that are apparently in the news everywhere these days. FAA has to integrate those into the national airspace, and they had to get that done by that date. Back when they first made that rule, it seemed like quite a ways off. Now it seems like it's almost here, if you ask me anyway. I believe they will introduce this rule next year as a draft, and then we go to town. So let's see what that's going to turn out to be. First of all, here's what LAMA originally asked for. We started working with FAA in 2014, 7 years ago now. At that time, if you recall, that was the 10th anniversary of light sport aircraft. And we said sport pilot and light sport aircraft, which are, by the way, they're two very different things, and they're very important that you keep those separated. Sport pilot is about the licensing side. Light sport aircraft is about certification, or it's not really certification, but the approval side of aircraft. And it's important that those two are not blurred. People contact me a lot and say, well, I'm an LSA pilot. And I say, well, do you fly LSA, or do you think you have an LSA license? Because you don't have that. You have a sport pilot certificate, or you use another higher certificate and use those privileges. So there is a distinction there, and I just wanted to make that clear early up because it does have a factor. So LAMA, when we first got together, we had a group about this size, about this many people, FAA people, other industry associations, several manufacturers and others, and we came up with a laundry list of 26 things we thought really needed to be changed in the regulation. And people who work with government people a lot said, no way, you never go ask for that many things, you'll never get them. You got to narrow it down to just the essentials. Here's the essentials. Electric, we didn't ask for hybrid, but they gave us that, or they're proposing to give us that. But we asked for electric. We asked for special LSA approval for gyroplanes, which had been missing all this time for no good reason. There are reasons, but I don't consider them good ones. There are people in a now defunct organization called the Rotorcraft Directorate really didn't like gyroplanes and fought them all the way. Now we're quite sure we're going to have fully built gyroplanes available in the community too. If you're one of those enthusiasts, that's a big deal, I think. Single lever control is another thing that sounds kind of strange perhaps, but mainly what it is an in-flight adjustable prop that you don't have to adjust. It adjusts automatically based on computer input, and the computer knows what speed the aircraft is going and things like that. So it can put the prop in the right place. The pilot doesn't have to, but you get the benefits of it. Does that make a LSA go quicker? Well, today it couldn't do that, although we do expect more speed later. But what that allows is more safety, we convinced FAA, because then these aircraft that are commonly used on short runways can be sure they're going to get off the runway and yet still cruise at a good altitude. All that happens automatically with single lever control. Today, the option would be rather expensive, about $15,000 per aircraft, which is kind of a lot of money for this class, but I believe that'll come down quickly once they give approval to it. Somebody clever will find a better way to do it at much less cost, I'm convinced. The last one, you may not think is important to you, but aerial work. We believe all these aircraft out here, maybe not every single one, but many of these aircraft out here can do some kind of work. Pipeline patrols, looking for lost people. There's a lot of kinds of things that you could do with these sorts of aircraft, at which they would be far cheaper than helicopters, commonly used for such things, and much more fuel efficient and have a lot going for them. Plus, they cost a lot less to acquire in the first place, so people can consider doing that. Maybe you're not interested in that now, but maybe you would be later if you could justify the purchase of your airplane by being able to do something with it. If that doesn't work for you, then maybe other people will do it. So we'll see how that goes. So quickly through here, LSA gyroplanes. If you don't know, gyroplanes have been kit built only since the beginning, and they've worked that out quite well. They've actually managed to sell a lot of gyroplanes in kit form, but it's an extra duty that a lot of people simply don't want. They just want to buy something they can go fly. That'll be coming. Single lever control. I made it sound like that's a new thing. It's not a new thing at all. The picture on the bottom shows a Cirrus SR20. An SR22 also is another model. Every single one of those has single lever control in it, except they're not single lever control. They're two controls because they're using engines that still need a mixture control. So they still got to do the mixture by hand. A Rotax engine, many of our current engines in this space don't need that. So all we have is one literal control. You put the throttle where you think it needs to be. The prop does the rest of the work for you. Aerial work, I mentioned, there's an image there that shows a camera mounted on a CT, I think that's a CTSW actually. And they can be used for that. Gyroplanes have also been used for that. Powered parachutes have been used for that because they're quite good at visibility in a short area. Like looking for lost children has been a place where powered parachutes have served a useful purpose. They can also do the aircraft on the bottom there is an aircraft that was made expressly for towing hang gliders aloft, which means it flies very slowly. It never goes very fast. And they have fitted that with crop spraying equipment. And it's just another thing that could be done. And people will say, well, wouldn't that be better done by a big airplane like a thrust or something like that that can carry a lot of stuff? Yes, sure, for doing enormous fields, that would be the better aircraft. But some fields are small, they need special applications, I'm told. I know nothing about it, but I'm told that these do have, with micro spray systems, they can be very useful. So I think there's a lot of things that could be done. And if that's still not important to you, think about it this way. The manufacturer of the airplane that you like might sell more airplanes if they could sell some of them for work environments, and some of those might be higher priced with higher profit margins, and that makes them a more solid business to support you and the aircraft that you want. So it is important that these companies have an opportunity wherever we can find it for them, and we're pretty sure that FAA is going to go for all of these things. We're also quite sure that they're going to go for electric. If you listen to any government person anymore, you'd think electric was all we could possibly use for transportation in the future. So airplanes are not going to be resisted, but they threw in hybrid. We didn't even ask for that. But as you see there in the bottom picture, that's an image of an aircraft I interviewed in Germany that has been flying for 3 or 4 years now in one of these kind of aircraft with a hybrid system in it. Says it works great. And now he doesn't have range anxiety problems. So a lot of new changes will be coming. In all of this, I want you to please be advised that this is a big sweeping regulation. I started out saying it has to do with RPVs or drones or whatever you want to call those. It includes them. It also includes warbirds and all kinds of things that are way out of our space. So this regulation covers a lot of ground. We are just one part of it. We think we're a real important part, but all those other people do too, of course. So another thing that is coming out is professional build centers. So for all of you that are interested in kits and maybe have been using that kind of thing already, FAA is going to expand that. They like the idea of you having professional help when you're building your kit. So that's going to go further. I'm now going to show you a slide that was actually part of the FAA presentation from this year's Oshkosh. And there are a few things that I want you to pay attention to here, which are highlighted, but you may not be able to read them, so I'm going to do it for you. The first one there says, no longer limited to what sport pilots may operate or light sport repairmen may maintain. Now, what that means is those aircraft that have had some limitations before, the doors are going to get opened a lot. That also includes things like bigger airplanes, bigger engines, retractable gear. I already mentioned adjustable props, although they'll probably be single lever, we believe. And things of that nature that you would say, well, but that's going to make an airplane that goes well outside of the sport pilot space. And if you said that, you're probably right. Sport pilots may not get to fly a 4-seat version of one of these, of which there are several already, actually. They just aren't in this country yet. But they may be able to fly that same airplane with just 2 people in it, you and a passenger. Retractable gear, well, sport pilots may not allowed to fly that either, but they're already doing it. I'm looking across over your shoulders here at a C-Max, a light sport aircraft with retractable gear, because it's a seaplane. It has to have retractable gear if it's amphibian anyway. So FAA has already gotten more comfortable with these kinds of things, and they've seen the value of some of this extra equipment. The third item down there says increase utility from sport to personal use, and that's where the 4 seats come in. They want these to be personal aircraft. So for a while there was a term called light personal aircraft that FAA had brought up, and at this year's Oshkosh that got scrubbed. There is no more light personal aircraft. They're all going to be light sport aircraft. Some will just be bigger than others. And then what defines whether or not you can fly it is what pilot certificate you have. If you're a sport pilot, you may not get to fly retractable, other than seaplane. You may not get to fly 4 seats. You may not get to fly the biggest, most powerful airplane you want. We'll see what happens with that. That comes out of another group called Flight Standards, and they've been a little less disclosing in what they're going to do. But here's something, that very last line on there, this is a critically important one. It says retain original philosophy for this category, and then 2 words, light and docile. If the aircraft is light, and if its handling and its flight characteristics are docile, it can be a light sport aircraft. Now, what defines that? Well, it's not going to be FAA. FAA says we're going to throw that to ASTM, and ASTM and the local community is going to decide what light and docile means. So, could a 4-seat airplane with a 200 horsepower aircraft on it qualify as light? Well, yes, in the sense that it's more lightly wing loaded, which is going to be one of the criteria. I'll get into some more of that detail too. There's a lot here, and I don't want to go too deeply into the weeds, but these are important. And then we've had something all along that we've called exemptions, various kinds of exemptions to do different things. For example, when you first get a sport pilot certificate, 20 hours, you can get one in as little as 20 hours. And when you first do that, you are not allowed to fly into Class B airspace. You can, however, get qualified to fly into Class B airspace by working with your flight instructor, and then you just get a logbook endorsement, no more testing. We think they're going to expand that concept a lot, saying they're going to push it to the community and say, you figure out how to do this, and we'll approve it or not. They're not just going to let us do whatever we want, but they're going to let us decide it, which I think is much, much better, because I'll give you an example here. At this year's AirVenture, there was a big noise about something that happened down here in Florida, which really put the hurt on flight instruction. It has to do with LODAs, the Letter of Deviation Authority, and how you can fly somebody in an aircraft that may not have some other 2-seat capabilities under the LSA rule. Again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but the fact of it was FAA got taken to task. They tried to take a warbird training outfit to court. They took them to court. And the judge said, well, FAA, your own rules, FAA, say that this kind of thing can't happen because you're carrying another occupant and you're charging him money to be in there. That's hauling a passenger. You're not allowed to do that. And FAA said, uh-oh, we got caught, basically. They had just been advising, they call it guidance, to their field people, and they said, yes, well, just make sure that it's this kind of thing, and then we let that go. But the actual rules that the judge read said, no, you can't do that. So that actually stopped a lot of flight instruction. Warbirds, kit-built airplanes, light sport aircraft, anything with a special certificate, in theory, can't do flight instruction unless you get a LODA. Now, they did make that easier, but here's what the administrator said, and making the point, I think, about throwing it to the community and that being valuable. He said, oh, yeah, we know that's a big problem. We're going to fix that. Give us 4 years. LAMA had already sent 2 sentences to FAA before this thing blew up and said, here's 2 sentences you could change in the existing regulation that would fix that whole problem. They acknowledged it. They said it was a good recommendation, but it's not yet part of the regulation because it's not out yet. But while we could do that in 2 sentences, FAA is going to take 4 years to sort this out. So if that's how long you want to wait for everything, then FAA is your right regulatory body. If you'd rather have something a lot quicker than that, which most of us would, then having the community take care of that's the right way to do it. It's a lot of work, though, so there's a lot of people in ASTM that are already doing it, but if any of you had those kinds of skills or interest, each one of you can join ASTM, $75 a year, and you can have direct and meaningful input into what ASTM decides, which is going to be a lot of stuff relative to this regulation. So if that interests you at all, go to astm.org. I get nothing out of this. That's not the point at all. And sign up, and you can be a voting member, and your vote counts as much. Your one vote counts as much as all of FAA. on the ASTM committee. That's kind of an important thing. So now one of the things that came out when this first rule was first introduced was, oh, they're going to be 3,600 pounds airplanes. Well, we're currently limited to 1,320 for a land plane. That's a pretty big increase. That number is not going to happen. But they could be that heavy. The number, there's not going to be a weight number anymore, and there won't be a speed number anymore, although they probably will put some cap on speed, unless I miss my guess. Or perhaps the definition of how the aircraft is constructed can control that. If you're going to have a 4-seat airplane, it's got to be light and docile. It's got to have a pretty big wing on it, not a little tiny wing, and that means it's going to be, it'll fly slower and do other things that are more like these aircraft. So it kind of makes some sense in the long run, but again, we're going to see how a lot of that has changed. And one thing that I told you has really changed is that light personal aircraft, that's all gone. Another thing that really gave people a tough time was something called the power index, which is a way of deciding how big an aircraft could be. And honestly, that formula, which is not a new formula, it's actually been around for many years, but it confused more people than it satisfied, including inside FAA. So that's gone too. They probably will cap horsepower at 200 horsepower, and power index is probably gone. I'm cautioning all of this because we don't know exactly what's going to happen yet, and neither do they. So what didn't change, I've already mentioned this, weight increase, yes, it's definitely going up. We will get some more speed. My guess is we might get 140 knots. And honestly, for these kind of aircraft and for sport pilots, that's a pretty good number. It's 155, 60 miles an hour, something like that. Pretty quick. Electric and hybrid I already mentioned, LSA gyroplanes I already mentioned, single lever control, aerial work. We're quite sure all this is going through, but there's more. 4 seats, I already mentioned that, and who gets to fly them? That's a big question yet unanswered. Retractable, I already mentioned that, same thing. Legacy GA airplanes, this comes up all the time. Well, I'm interested. I have a 152, 150, I have a 172, I have a Piper Cherokee. Will I be able to fly that under the new rule? Yes, possibly. Now, first of all, that aircraft is not going to change. It's still got a standard category, not a special category. That's not going to change. Its certification level will never change. But they may allow a sport pilot to fly one that meets the new parameters as they will be decided. So that's pretty important. Another one is mechanics. Mechanics will be able to do all the work they can do today. Will they be able to work on, let's say an electric propulsion system? Probably not initially, because what would they know about it? Even an A&P is not trained for anything about electric as far as propulsion. So what will happen then? There'll be new courses. There's a great outfit that does a lot of good work called Rainbow Aviation. Used to be in California. Now they're in Missouri, I think. Missouri, is it? And they do a great job. They're already working on this to put courseware together, which they'll have to go get approvals on and like that. But they're going to do that work. But initially, nobody will be approved, and then later, anybody can get approved to do certain kinds of work. So if you're interested in that, yes, those possibilities will be there. I mentioned legacy GA aircraft. All these that you see on the screen there right now, they're ones that could conceivably be flown by. They won't be a light sport aircraft. None of these will be converted to be a light sport aircraft. They will just be something you can fly with a sport pilot certificate or the privileges thereof with your higher level certificate, just as it's always been. I mentioned earlier what I call the magic of endorsements, because this FAA has acknowledged this has worked very well in light sport aviation, I'll call it, sport pilot certificate and light sport aircraft. People can be trained, as I mentioned, to fly into Class B. People can be trained how to do retractable. You can't, with a basic sport pilot certificate, you can't go fly that C-Max. You need a little more training, as you should. It's got retractable gear on it. You should learn how to operate that properly. But once you do, you get a logbook endorsement, no testing, you're done. No FAA guy comes and looks at you or anything. So can that work a lot more? Yes, I think it probably could. So I mentioned all those kinds of things, and I'm hopeful that they're going to go a lot further with that. I'm not sure how they're going to administrate it, though, because that they will not throw to the community. The community will not get to certify pilots. You can train them, you can take them to a designee who will certify them, but the industry will not get that, as we are getting with the airplane, which kind of seems to me backwards. The airplane seems more complicated to me, but I'm kind of glad they're doing it this way because we can move faster. And once they set those certificate rules in place, they won't change much anyway. So then what? LSA will certainly be more capable. They'll carry higher weights. They'll fly faster. They'll have adjustable props. Everything will hinge on flight standards group as to what happens about that for pilots. So there are two groups we have worked with. One of them is called aircraft certification. That's everything from airline down to hang gliders, and they judge the aircraft. They don't do anything with the pilot side. Another group called flight standards is the ones that set the rules for what a pilot can do and what they have to prove. We'll look to hear more from them later. I mentioned mechanics as well, so I'm just going to pop by this. I've just mentioned what's on the screen right now with who's in charge of these various things. The two categories, aircraft cert and flight standards. Those are both important things. There is another group for maintenance, and I'm sure they'll weigh in on that part of things. And then there's the legal department of FAA. For some of you that remember back to 2004 when the Sport Pilot Light Sport Aircraft Rule came out, you might recall that EAA was announcing excitedly every year, 3 years before, that this year FAA is going to come and announce the Sport Pilot Light Sport Aircraft Rule. And it didn't happen. And the next year, they're coming this year, and it didn't happen. And the next year, that year it finally did happen. That was summer of 2004. The rule became effective September 1st, 2004. The reason why it was 3 years in the making was because of the lack of a medical requirement, and FAA legal held that up for 3 years. Bunch of lawyers, you know. So anyway, we hope they will be more accommodating this time, but FAA legal is a powerful part of the agency, and we'll see what they do. But here are some things I like to repeat because these are exact words that FAA has stated. All of these things. LSA has been a successful development. It's not my words. These are FAA big shots saying this. The former regulation, the one we're under right now, is unnecessarily restrictive. Yes, you're hearing that from government people, by the way. That's not something you hear all the time, but there it is. Opportunities to expand this sector of aviation are good. In fact, FAA sees that this is what they call the bridge to Part 23 type airplanes, Cessnas, Cirruses, so on. And finally, FAA, I've told you this already, but this is, again, their exact words. FAA wants the revised regulation to allow the industry to do more. Now, you can look at that two ways. You can say, we FAA don't want to do the work. We want you to do the work. We like to get paid our same salaries and have you do the work. That sounds good, right? But in fact, we would rather they do that, even though most of us who do this kind of thing are volunteers. I don't get paid to work on ASTM. Most people who work on the ASTM committee do not get paid to do that. It's a volunteer job, and yet we'd rather do it than have FAA do it. Here's their main mantra, what FAA is living by. They call it either easy to fly or docile to fly, and industry will get to determine that. Gulp. That means industry bears some responsibility too, of course. So what can we do? Well, we have the burden. Right now, the ASTM committee is meeting every 2 weeks online, usually, some sort of arrangement like that, and then in-person meetings, because every single ASTM standard, which has governed every single one of these airplanes out here, if they're LSA anyway, all those regulations have to be, all those standards have to be reviewed in light of the coming regulation, which means they have to share some of these ideas with ASTM, which is how I find out about them, because they're not broadcasting them very far, but they have to tell us what's going on so we can plan for it. So that's what's working now. The good news is, as I've said several times, it will make changes much quicker. If we discover a problem, and there will be one, we will make mistakes. Unfortunately, somebody may suffer from those mistakes, but they can be corrected, and we can correct them as an industry far faster than FAA. I have seen changes to the ASTM standards in as little as 30 days. I don't think FAA has ever done anything that fast in their whole life except go to lunch. So, volunteers, I told you that already, and it's also international. ASTM is not just an American standard. It used to stand for American Standards, American Society for Testing Standards and Standards for Testing of Materials. There it is. Now it's just ASTM International. They lost all the other words because it's very global. So LSA standards and these same aircraft, one reason why a lot of these are from another country is because those countries also use these same standards. That's very good for people that are producing these aircraft. You don't have to meet 100 different standards. So that's a very strong thing. So what can you do about this now? Okay, so I want to advise you about this. The NPRM, or Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, is the thing that they come out with first, and they say, literally, this is what we're proposing to do. Comment on it. They must read and evaluate every single comment they get. If every single one of you write, they must read it. This is why they need from that so if you go back calendar a little bit, I said it had to be done by the end of 2023. They need 16 months to do that. Reading every single comment, deciding if they should change things because of those comments, making the changes, coming out with the final draft and all that. That's all got to happen in 16 months, and it's got to happen. So that means this rule, this NPRM, pretty much has to come out. My prediction is next year's AirVenture 2022 up in Oshkosh. If they don't release this, then I'll eat this hat, because they have to get it out by then, if not before. Now, that doesn't mean it'll be done then, I caution. That means it's time for you to comment. So please, when that happens, EAA and ALPA and LAMA and every organization, I believe, will be encouraging you and supplying you the names of your representatives if you don't know who they are in Congress, and contact them. Write comments to FAA. Tell them whatever you think. Tell them whatever your opinion is. I'm not trying to tell you what to say. Just say something. It's going to be your shot at it. And if they go this way, we'll be in pretty good shape, I think. So, again, I just mentioned now, when should you act? The rule has to come out the end of 2023. This thing pretty much has to be announced at AirVenture next year. So sharpen your pencils in July and start getting ready to write, or fire up your keyboard, or however you do it. One thing that people ask about a lot is Part 103s, and I want to observe for you that next year is a great big year for Part 103. It's the 40th anniversary of this regulation. To my knowledge, it is the only aviation regulation that has not changed once in 40 years. There's not been a single word of change to that thing in 40 years. There were a couple right away, and then after that it stayed in place. And there's a few aircraft out here that are fit into that category, and that category is on fire these days. You may not know it, but Part 103 ultralights are selling very well right now. The best I've seen in many, many years. So they're in great shape. We are not asking for any changes here. Some people get irritated with us when we say that. Oh, a few more pounds would be so good, or this or that. Sure, yeah, they would be. I don't deny that. But if we go ask them to change anything, the whole rule gets evaluated. Today, it can be literally printed on the front and back of a single piece of paper. No, I could hold up an FAR guide. It's about 800 pages long, and there's no other regulation that's even close to that. If they change that at all, it'll be a 200-page document, and it'll have a lot more rules in it. We don't want that. We're not going to go ask them. Plus, FAA says, don't bother. You won't be happy with what you get. It'll take years, and we might not do it anyway. So there you go. So now I'm going to tell you just if you want to keep up with this further, please go on bydanjohnson.com. I try and keep up with this as best I can. There's video, there's articles, all kinds of stuff. And if something big breaks between now and next Oshkosh, I'll do my best to write everything I can about it. And at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and see if there's anything I might answer. Hang on just a second, John, just so everybody can hear what your comments are.
Dan, would you comment a little bit more on the LOTA? There are those people who have light sport aircraft that might be experimental and want to get instruction in it?
Sure. So right today, that's an LSA as well, and anything that's experimental, or a warbird, if you're into that sort of thing, you have to get what's called a letter of deviation authority. I mentioned that. I said that while they're going to go fix this, and it'll take them 4 years. Meanwhile, what they did do is make a LOTA, it's just a quicker way to say it, a much faster process. And I've been told by a few people, I don't know, have you inquired? Okay. And did it go pretty quickly?
Next day.
Okay, so, and yours too. Okay, so that's great, Hollis, to hear that. I've heard that from a few people, and so obviously they did clean that up because it didn't used to be anywhere near that fast. Yeah, sure, please.
There's the clarification would be either the instructor needs to get the LOTA or the owner of the aircraft needs to get the LOTA. Is there some confusion there associated with it?
My understanding, and I would think you'd know better than I actually, but I understand that the instructor needs one, the pilot needs one, and the aircraft needs one. There are actually 3 LOTAs involved, although they may be one piece of paperwork.
When I got my LOTA, they didn't even ask for make or model.
Yeah, but you already have a background. So I think what they're doing, I've heard some other people say that too. Yeah, I got all makes and models, somebody said. Right. And that's good when they recognize that someone like John's been in the business quite a while. When they recognize it, hey, you already know what you're talking about, so we're not going to restrict you to a Bristol, which is what John represents. But so that's good. I'm glad to hear that. But at least they can ask for all 3, I guess. Perhaps they don't, but anyway, it's kind of it had been a difficult process. Then you had to define areas, you had to have lesson plans. There was a whole bunch of stuff you had to do. And a lot of people went, "Nah, I don't want to do all that. There's a lot of paperwork just to go fly in airplanes." That part they've eased a lot. Am I correct in saying that? Okay, good. All right, any other questions? We want to hear you loud and clear, so.
Okay, well, thanks so much for your work over all those years to get these changes done. I had a question regarding the speed limits, right? You were mentioning that perhaps there could be a horsepower cap of around 200 horsepower, but some of these sleek ultralights are very clean designs in tandem sometimes, and in Europe they fly without any speed limits. Or how would it go if you have a 200 horsepower machine that has a sleek design of limiting the speed to 140 knots? Is that something that's fixed, or you expect that there will be a speed limit? This is the bottom line of my question.
I think so. Yes, I'm not 100% sure though, because and they aren't either. That's why I can't answer it more affirmatively. I would like to, but I can't. They just light and docile. Those are the words. Now, is something that goes 250 miles an hour docile? Well, yes, possibly. That speed doesn't mean it's not docile. So, if you could defend that, I don't know. Maybe it would go much higher. But reasonably speaking, here's what happens. If they were to say, okay, you LSA guys, you want to go 250 miles an hour, go ahead and do it. Guess who might push back on that? People that are making $800,000 Cirruses might not like that so much. Now, they can't go in and say we don't like that, but they can say the right words to the right people and go, we think that could be a safety issue. And boy, you mentioned safety at FAA, and they're all hunkered down right away. So I think what they're going to do is they'll put some structure around it to limit it. But yes, I know the airplane that you have is quite a quick airplane. There's a number of them that can do 150, 160 knots pretty easily, and yet slow down well and are easy to fly airplanes. It's not that challenging to do. So I think those kind of numbers, your airplane, Bristol is capable of some higher speeds, and of course at true airspeed is not the limiting factor. It's indicated airspeed is the limiting factor. So at altitude, even a slower airplane on the right day might go faster than 120 knots, and that's legal. So I think that there's a good chance that this will turn out to be a higher speed than that, but we'll just have to see what they come up with and how they limit it. And again, I say, they are not going to decide all this. They're going to throw this back to ASTM. So if you're interested in this and you think you have anything to offer, you have as much as I. I'm no engineer, but I have things to offer the ASTM group. Please do sign up for that. Take your vote, read the stuff, participate, and who knows, you might be able to help influence things. Good question, though. Thank you for bringing it up. Any other questions? Hang on just a second. He's coming to you. We want to be able to hear you.
Certified light sport eligible airplanes.
I assume you mean GA airplanes that already have a certification? Yes. So let's say Cessna 150. That's kind of an obvious one because Cessna 150.
That's not eligible right now.
It's not now, but it may be.
Well, I'm talking about now.
Oh, right now? There is a list. EAA maintains a list. Aeronca 7EC Champ, for example, that can make it. Now, it's not a light sport. It can be flown by a sport pilot. It's still a standard category aircraft, but it can be flown by a sport pilot. And there are a handful of others, actually.
They're not on your list of airplanes.
Not on my list because I kind of feel like that's EAA's domain. So I focus just on, I don't go into that space, although, but EAA does have a list. If you go on to EAA.org, you can find a list about that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, well, I know this is the wrong air show, but see you next year.
Folks,
Oh,
give it
what?
up for Dan Johnson.
Thank you very kindly.
I got to tell you, Jim is one of my personal heroes. I've been watching for quite a long time, and urge you to go to buydanjohnson.com and see a lot of the great work Dan's done, because without him, people like him, the Wright brothers wouldn't even been flying. So, thank you, Dan.
I'm not that old. I'm old, but not that old. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful.